Declan, thank you very much. An extraordinary rich set of data there and showing trends going back to 1841. So thank you very much for the immense amount of work you put into that presentation. Right, we have a few minutes to take questions and comments, and we'll start firstly with Chris at the back.
Good morning. I'd just like to start to say I've never been so emotionally affected by a group of graphs or statistics as I was by the Central Statistics Office presentation. That was amazing. It was strange to see an expression of the loss of so many young people in bar charts. My question was, is the extension of rights necessarily a constitutional one? I don't remember a referendum in the mid to late 80s to give the Department of Foreign Affairs rights to vote abroad. I was probably more obsessed with being a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle than I was with a referendum at the time. But is it necessarily constitutional? Is it legislative? Could we extend rights more easily than maybe enshrining them?
Okay, we'll take that. Any other comments? There were other people who wanted to get in before. Stuart, do you want to come in? And
just a very brief question.
Again, name please.
Sorry, Stuart Dixon, MLA. Just to ask a very brief question in relation to those migrant outward statistics. What differentiates between a migrant and a temporary absent individual? How do you mark that point?
Okay, thank you. Mark Daly.
Yeah, Mark Daly. Just going back to one of the previous presentations, a short question on, of the countries, I think it was 15 of them, 14 that only extend voting rights in presidential elections. How many of those would be presidencies that have US-type presidential powers, and then those who would be limited, like our president? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we'll take one more question now from Tom there, and then we'll go back to the panel.
Thanks, Chairman. Tom Burke. Question for the statistician there. I'm not sure if you can answer for us. I have heard the figure of 1 million Irish-born being resident in the United Kingdom, in Great Britain. Is there an estimate of the number of Irish-born resident outside the state? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's try and answer those. Whoever, maybe Declan to do the statistical ones first, and then we go. Yeah.
Okay. Just on the question on the definition of a migrant, we would be working around what we'd call a 12-month criteria, that we would be specifically trying to home in on individuals that would either be leaving the country for a period of at least 12 months, and likewise when we'd be talking about immigrants, people coming into the country, we'd be really only homing in again on those that would be with the intention of staying or have been staying here for at least 12 months. These definitions would be the same as they're trying to adopt right across Europe, like with certain institutions like Eurostat. With regards the number of Irish residents abroad, the simple answer to that is no, we don't have a number on that, because of the complexity in trying to compile such a number. We're talking about 220 countries that all collect their data differently to each other and to us. Part of my work is as well, I work with census inquiries, and if any of you contacted me on Monday and asked me how many nationals of a particular group were living in Ireland, we could come back to you in half an hour and get you that figure. But we're fairly ahead of the game in that respect. Not all other countries would have that set up to accommodate. Some countries might have a census, but they may not ask the question that you need to obtain information from that country on the number of residents, Irish residents living there. As well, we'd have to be careful. What is the definition? Are you talking about a recent migrant from Ireland? Are you talking about someone that had maybe emigrated back in the 50s or the 60s? Are you talking about first generation, second generation? Do you have the breakdown by age? So there's a lot of complexities to trying to obtain that information from the rest of the world. Not to mention, not all countries have census. Some would base their population on just a survey. So there could be margins of error there. So how would you harmonise that between countries to bring it up to a standard you're happy with? You're very much dependent on the host country to give you the information. Where other countries mightn't even have a survey or a census. They might have a population register. That has its benefits, but it also has its disadvantages. What's the incentive to register when you go to another country on this population register, or if you subsequently leave the country, is there an incentive to take your name off the register? So how accurate is it? And again, from country to country, that level of accuracy will be different. So it would be a difficult task to try and obtain a total number of Irish residents living abroad across the globe, because you can't be assured of the quality that you'll be getting from each individual country if the information is obtainable in the first place.
Thank you, Teresa. And then Susan.
Excuse me, just on the category in the table that, oh, sorry. Just on the category in the table that you were asking me about, yes, the vast majority of those are presidential systems in the ones that we would be familiar with, for example, would be the United States or France. But even further down also, in the case of countries where there are voting rights for citizens abroad at both presidential and referendums, the vast majority of those countries are also those with, where they specifically say presidential systems, those are presidential elections, those are ones with presidential systems. But I would just add to that is because that it is a little bit unusual that in parliamentary systems you have direct elections for the president. That's actually a little bit unusual feature in many countries where you have a president who is the nominal head of state. Very often those are appointed through parliamentary processes. So Ireland is a little bit of an outlier in that structure in the first instance, in that we actually have direct elections for the presidency. But there are other countries in that category, and just in the European case, I would point to Austria and Portugal, both who also elect their head of state within a parliamentary system, and in both of those cases they do extend voting rights to citizens abroad.
But my question is, of the 14 that do it, that you pointed out that only give votes in presidential elections, how many of those 14 are US style, and how many of those?
The vast majority of them are US style. They're presidential systems, yeah.
So are we going to be the only country in the world, if we go ahead with the idea of giving voting rights to immigrants, to give it to them in a presidential election that doesn't have the same power as the other 14? Sorry, I'll repeat that for the benefit of the room. Of the 14 countries that only give votes to immigrants in presidential elections, would we be the only country that would give voting rights to immigrants solely in presidential elections, where the presidency is largely ceremonial but also has limited constitutional powers? Would that be the case?
We would be unusual, but we are already unusual in the sense of having direct election for the presidency anyway.
Yeah, but
in the
I
sense
know
that we don't.
I don't have the list of 14 in front of me, but of those 14,
They're all. I can't tell you absolutely, but they're mostly in they're mostly in Africa and South America, and the vast majority are presidential systems.
are very and they have serious presidential powers like the United States.
Yes, in that model, yes.
So of the Irish model, which is ceremonial with constitutional role in terms of vetting bills, would we be the only one doing that?
No, we wouldn't be the only one, because both Austria and Portugal have.
Okay, sorry, Mark. I think we've got that point.
But
No,
do
sorry,
Austria
Mark.
give votes to immigrants in parliamentary elections?
Portugal do, and Austria. I'll bring it down to you. I'll bring you the table.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
it's
just
probably
like
the easiest
answering
thing.
that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you want Chris's question there about the
I'm not the constitutional expert here.
No.
But I just would like to come back to this question, because the implication is that if we are the only country that have elections for only presidents that are honorific, or presidents, head of state rather than executive powers, that makes us a bit anomalous. But I have to say, and I think Teresa's evidence has shown, there are as many varieties of combinations of electoral systems for voters abroad across the country, across the world, as you could imagine. So they're all anomalous. None of them are completely standard and principled. So I don't think you'd worry about it being different from other people's systems. That's all I'd say.
Okay. I'm going to cut it now because we need a break for 15 minutes, because we are starting at 11 o'clock precisely with our global conversation, linking in around the world. So it'll be very exciting. So 15 minutes. We're back then.